Well, the day has finally arrived. Uh, the ADL is now partnering officially with PayPal to try and root out, extremism and white supremacy. And I think, in their words, uh, try and better understand how extremism is funded and how these evil insurrectionist groups, the kinds of people who wave Trump flags, receive funding and where their income comes from. Obviously, with the intention to cut off the income for people who are considered to be extremists or generally displeasurable by the ADL. Now, for those of you who don't know, the ADL, they're an arm of the Israel lobby, and their job is to go around, and they're definitely on the left wing of the Israel lobby. They're not so left wing that they care about Palestinians, but I mean, they're left wing enough to be very, very woke and to hate anyone who's remotely to the right of, I would say Bill Maher, but I think Bill Maher might be too spicy for them too. Maybe anyone to the right of Joe Biden. But anyone to the left of Joe Biden is probably pretty undesirable too, because they're probably crypto, what would they call them? Crypto anti-Semites, maybe. They're a little nicer to people on the left, but the ADL is still pretty darn tough on anyone who's critical of Israel, even if they're on the left. And so they're perhaps one of the worst groups to try and censor free speech online and in the financial sector, because they cast such a wide net. The folks who are considered to be evil extremists by the ADL, I don't think that anyone casts a wider net other than perhaps the Southern Poverty Law Center, also known or by the name given to them by Thomas DiLorenzo, author of The Real Lincoln, which is a great book about the real Abraham Lincoln that we're not taught about in school. He coined the phrase the Soviet Poverty Lie Center, which I think is a little more accurate. But this story is not about the SPLC, it's about the ADL, which, again, like I said, not a whole lot of daylight between those two organizations as far as I'm concerned. They're both really terrible, and if you're listening to this, they think that you're an extremist. Just so you know, I'm going to put that out there. If you've never heard of the ADL, if you're just finding out who they are, they want you destroyed. And so PayPal, you would say, well, PayPal's just one company. My bank is JP Morgan Chase. Well, I assure you, whatever the ADL is going through with PayPal, in due time, it will trickle out through the rest of, I guess you would say, the retail banking space. Not the PayPal as a bank or anything, but they're a payment processor. They conduct retail financial services for end users, for ordinary people, and that's really who they're going after here. They want to try and lock dissident voices out of the monetary system. They want you they want you locked out of commerce, essentially. And by the way, PayPal owns Venmo, so Venmo might be one of the first of these new digital cash type of apps, which lets people exchange money between each other kind of like cash, but digitally, which I've been very suspicious of these ever since they started to come out. Just trying a way of conditioning people away from using cash. One of the last uses that cash has, private transactions, even that is being digitized. I thought that was a very clear honeypot. And so personally, I don't use any of those apps like Cash App or Venmo or what's the other one? There's one more I'm not thinking of, but the Google Pay, Apple Pay, all that sort of stuff. I don't like any of it, and at the end of the day, until they finally take away paper money, that is going to be your last line of defense. The banks have been planning to come after the politically incorrect for a very long time. They started, I believe, with the gun industry. There has been a lot of work done over the years, and a lot of groundwork, I should say, has been laid trying to wait for the time when the banks would just come out and say, hey, we're not going to do business with gun dealers anymore. You also have big investment banks like BlackRock saying, hey, we're not going to invest in, we're not going to have any of our funds invested in gun companies because, you know, gun violence is a problem. And they're trying to make their businesses more, I guess, responsible from a left-wing perspective. There's also a lot of banks that will make a pledge not to invest in fossil fuel companies, that sort of thing, not make any loans to oil companies. And so it was only a matter of time before that corporate woke capital finance made its way into sectors of the financial economy that affected individual, ordinary Americans. Now, the question is then, what do you do about this? Because this is coming. They will get to the point to where they start banning people, where banks will close your account because you said a no-no word on Twitter. That sort of thing is happening. They're going to go back and start combing through people's social media history, trying to find reasons to deny financial services to them. That is going to happen, and you're going to say, oh, no, that's not fair. You know, they have to accommodate me. They can't discriminate me against, you know, like that. They, you know, there are regulations against this. Doesn't matter. You don't understand. You don't control the institutions. The regulators will change whatever rules need to be changed, or just ignore the rules in order to allow these financial service providers to discriminate against you because you're a bad person and you don't deserve to be served. You should be thrown out of polite society. That's what real power is. It doesn't matter if the rules are on your side. What matters is if the rulers are on your side. So in the short term, there needs to emerge a free speech payment processor. Now, I'm sure there are ones that exist. Somehow, InfoWars is still in business, so they found someone to process their payments. The porn industry, you know, is seedy and disgusting as you might feel those people are. They have been dealing with discrimination from the banks for a very long time. Banks don't like to do business with pornographers. They apparently, a lot of porn stars can't even qualify for credit cards. Shows you how credit scores are in some ways already a social credit score, because you might say, hey, these porn stars, they have plenty of income. Why wouldn't they be able to qualify for these? Or why, if they already have the card, why would they have it taken away? Well, it's because they had really low social credit scores. Same thing with Alex Jones and InfoWars. Why it's so hard for them to do business? Because they're on the fringes of society now. They've been excluded from polite society. Now, the unfortunate thing is then the folks that they do business with know that they have them over a barrel, and so they're not as competitive, and so they're going to probably pay a great sum, a premium for the right to do business. And that's why I think in the short run, what needs to happen is like I said, there needs to be some kind of free speech payment processor / bank, preferably one that, you know, is not operating on a fractional reserve basis, but that might be asking too much. After all, this is a short-term stopgap solution. It's not a long-term solution. Long-term solutions are people moving away from the centralized monetary system. And I'm not a crypto guy. I'm not one of these crypto evangelists who wants to tell everyone to go out and buy Bitcoin because it's going to change the world, because that may or may not be true. I don't know. It's up to you. But this is the sort of thing that the crypto guys, this is, you know, part of their case for whatever their crypto thing is, mainly the Bitcoin guys. They say, hey, this is what Bitcoin is for. It's so that you can be independent from the banking system and from the centralized monetary system. This is the answer. And that might be the answer. But there are other answers too. You know, if you just wanted to start piling up a safe full of gold and silver coins. You could transact in that if you wanted. If you were someone who was totally excluded eventually from the financial system, and they took away cash, because again, we can go to cash first. Because if they start banning enough people, then there will be a shadow or a black market, essentially, of people in this country who cannot operate in what once was the mainstream monetary and financial system. If they start going after people for their beliefs and they start ramping this up, and cancel culture really does sweep the banking system, there's going to be a lot of us who need that alternative. And ultimately, the market will determine what the best solution is. It's not, it doesn't really matter what my opinion is. The way that money works is that people will tend towards one form of money. And so if we are excluded from the current monetary system, whatever the next best form of money is, it will gain adoption eventually. What makes something money is not any objective characteristics. It's how it's used. And so eventually there will be different things. You will see people, if, again, we have this worst case scenario where just en masse people are getting kicked off of PayPal and getting banned by Bank of America and American Express and Citibank and Chase and Capital One. And if all these, mainstream banks start kicking people off because they are guilty of wrongthink, those folks will find a way to transact. Maybe for in-person transactions and small transactions, people will use silver coins, and for big transfers of money, like buying a house, maybe they'll use Bitcoin. It could be a mix of things. You never know. It doesn't have to be just one thing. But those alternatives that people have been talking about for so long, which people have always spun as, hey, this is what you do when the dollar collapses. Maybe the dollar doesn't collapse. Maybe instead of the dollar collapsing and people just choosing to abandon the dollar, perhaps people will be excluded from the dollar, which again is what happens in all of these countries which are guilty of wrongthink and which are enemies of the establishment and of neoliberalism. What happens to countries like Cuba and Venezuela and Russia and whoever else? They get sanctioned. They get excluded from SWIFT. They get cut off from the US dollar. And what have I been saying since Biden was inaugurated? I've been saying that, and I'm not the only one, a lot of people are saying this, the federal government is openly taking the tactics that they learned from the war on terror, taking tactics that they used to deal with international threats to the regime, and turning them on the domestic population. There is a domestic war on terror. They're treating us like they've treated foreigners in the past. And if you look at the kinds of things that they've done to foreigners when it comes to going after them financially, they cut people off from the dollar. And so what happens if all of a sudden you have a lot of business owners who, let's say Visa, for example, or MasterCard, one of those two, decides to start banning people because of their political beliefs? Well, then you walk into a store or a restaurant and you try and pay your bill and they say, sorry, we don't accept Visa. I'm banned from Visa because I'm guilty of wrongthink. Well, people will have to find, if they want to, interact with those kinds of businesses, they're going to have to find another way to pay those folks. And the same thing is true if they're the customer and the customer gets banned, and they say, and the guy says, hey, you can pay for your hamburger with a Visa card. I accept Visa. And he says, sorry, and you say, sorry, I'm banned from Visa. I'm a thought criminal. I mean, hell, look at the drug trade. The drug trade still goes on, despite the fact that it's completely illegal. And they don't just kick drug dealers, out of the banking system. They, completely unperson drug dealers to the point that they put them in prison. So we're not to that stage yet, and the drug dealers still find a way to get business done. Now, of course, what's their favorite tool to do that? It is the US dollar. We can't forget that. They still use dollars. So even the people who are the most persecuted industry in the country, when it comes to business, the people who are the most persecuted by the financial system and by the state, they still choose to use dollars. So don't get too psyched for Bitcoin yet. But like I said, for large financial transactions that are occurring between people who are far away from each other, the Bitcoin thing might make a lot more sense than cash. It's hard to do it. It's hard to buy a house in cash, especially when the police will confiscate cash from you. If you hold too much cash on your person, the police will go, hey, why are you holding so much cash? Are you a drug dealer? I'm going to take your cash. The other problem is the tax implications of transacting in something that's not legal tender, which I don't have time to even think about the implications of that or get into that right now, but that would be another issue, is things would be taxed in a less favorable way. For example, if you wanted to divest your dollars and buy a bunch of gold or silver, or I would think even Bitcoin, probably, although I don't know. But I mean, you would probably, I know definitely with gold and silver, you'd have to pay sales tax depending on what state you're in. And that's because those are not considered legal tender. Those are just products. And so if you exchange your dollars for those are just a product that you're choosing to purchase. So buckle up, but stay calm. I think that, again, things will get bumpy for a while as far as this is concerned, but there will be a solution eventually. And I'm not saying that it will magically materialize. Someone will have to invent a solution. I don't think that person's going to be me, but it's going to be somebody. It might be you. And so give this some thought and think about how you could get around it. This is something that I've thought about quite a bit. I don't know much about starting a bank or a payment processor or how I could get around these things, but there are probably people who are already involved in that industry, who might believe in freedom of speech, who do have the knowledge, if not the capital, to set something up like that. So stay positive, which is not something I say very often. And I will see you folks back here tomorrow.